Hello there! Welcome to Heartpanorama, a podcast that will take you on a journey through aspects of everyday life, such as personal development, life hacks, and other relatable topics. My name is Michelle, and I'm excited to share some of my thoughts with you in this podcast series. While I talk about today's topic, I'm mentioning certain brands, products, or services. Any form of product placement in this podcast solely serves discussion purposes and is not paid or sponsored in any way. In today's podcast episode, I'd like to address a topic that I wrote a blog article about in 2015. That is the article called The Inner Child. I will add the link into the description in case you're interested in reading the full article after listening to this podcast. So in this episode, I'm going to read out paragraphs from my own blog article and comment on them so we can see if my opinion has stayed the same or if I have anything to add now that it's 4 years later. So without further ado, let's get started with the first paragraph. As children, we usually don't care about what other people think of us. We aren't ashamed of the things we like. But as we grow older, we encounter situations where others make fun of us. I think it is especially during our teenage years that we try to fit in and, in the context of becoming adults, leave things that are considered childish aside, no matter how much we love them. So I still think that this is true, though I feel like there's been a shift in the past few years. Animated movies and series seem to be accepted more than before, but this is just my perception. Probably affected by the people I interact with online and offline and people who are talking openly about this. And I cannot say for sure that this is actually the case, but it's just my perception that it is more accepted to watch movies or series that are animated. On to the next paragraph. Now that I'm 21, I realize how I miss a few things I grew up with, especially watching children's movies. I talk about movies or series that actually tell a story with an interesting plot and a storyline that is thought through well. Just because a movie is animated, thus not in live action, and therefore considered a movie made for children, it doesn't mean adults without kids can't watch them. And if you enjoy watching them, it doesn't make you any less of an adult. I think when I wrote this, I was feeling quite nostalgic, but also trying to justify why I got back into watching cartoons and animes. But I still agree that if there's an interesting plot and storyline, why should you not enjoy watching the movie or series? Also, something I didn't mention back then, there are also cartoons that are made for adults and are not really suitable for children or teenagers, and the fact that it's animated here is not an argument for it to be a kids' show. Let's move on to the next paragraph. In my surroundings, liking Disney movies seems to be widely accepted among adults. It's as if everyone knows the others are watching them too, and therefore don't feel ashamed of admitting it. In the office where I work as a working student, there's a colleague who's in his early 30s and recently became a father. He told us he's looking forward to finally watching Disney movies without feeling ashamed of it, because he's got an alibi now. Why are we adults ashamed? Why do we need to find alibis if people discover us watching those movies? Quick side note, I don't even work at that company anymore. Anyway, my questions from back then are still valid. Why do we feel like we have to explain ourselves to justify why we're watching the movies or the series? Why can't we just go ahead and watch them as if it's nothing special, as if it's just a regular thing to do? But then again, like I said earlier, I feel like there's been a shift in the society's way of thinking recently. Watching Disney movies seems widely common nowadays. It's just about other animated movies now that we sometimes have to explain ourselves, or certain people feel like they have to explain themselves. And I definitely was one of them in my early 20s because I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that I shouldn't be ashamed of watching movies or series that are animated. So yeah. Now there's one more paragraph of my old blog article that I'd like to address. Talking to some of my closest friends, I know it's ridiculous to feel ashamed of loving something I grew up with. I think I've come to realize there's more to life than all of those serious topics. Sometimes we just need to escape reality and enjoy things that make us happy. And I still think this is so true. When comparing my friends, I understand that there are people that still enjoy cartoons, others not so much, and that's fine. It just depends on your personal preferences, and it doesn't have anything to do with their age, but with what movies they like to watch and what kind of movies they're into or series. And you can't just generalize that starting from a certain age you aren't allowed to watch cartoons anymore. And I think that's fine. You just have to accept that people have different tastes in media and just find people who you can enjoy the things you enjoy with. In the 4 years since I wrote this blog article, watching animated movies and series has become part of my everyday life. I don't think about it being embarrassing anymore because it isn't. It doesn't matter what other people think, and you just don't have to run up to random people and rub it in their face that you're watching a cartoon, because I think people just won't be interested. And it's just fine if you talk to your peers or your other friends who share your interests. And I can still exchange opinions with my online and offline friends who enjoy the same movies or the same series, and they hype about the same things as I do. And by getting to know those people, I realized that I'm not the only person my age who cares about a certain series or movie that is animated. I know I somehow didn't address live action children's movies here, but I think that's not that big of an issue as it is with animated movies. I don't like to say there is none, but I think the self-consciousness about watching cartoons is more present, but again, that's just my perception. As for my former choice to refer to the inner child in my blog article, yes, it is partly an escape from adulthood and pleases your inner child. But on the other hand, like I said before, there are also animated movies for older teens or young adults, or even adults in general, where the plot and storyline include more violence, for example. So they're not really children's movies. And in my opinion, that makes the argumentation with the inner child somehow redundant. It was really interesting to pick up an old blog article of mine and rephrase my opinion on that topic. And it makes me realize that as I grow older, even if it's only been 4 years since I wrote that article, my view in certain aspects has indeed changed, and I realize that I gain new perspectives as I grow older. So in my next podcast episode, I am going to do the same thing like I did here, and will pick another favorite blog article from back then and talk about it. What is your opinion on accepting your inner child? Can you think of other ways to do so besides watching cartoons? For example, certain activities? Don't forget to let me know in the comments. If you'd like to read my full blog article that I talked about in this podcast, you can find the link to it in this episode's description. That was today's episode of Heartpanorama. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a like and leave a comment. Stay tuned for upcoming podcast episodes by subscribing to my channel and activating the notification bell. Check out the links in the description to find out where else you can find me and my podcast. Have a nice week and take care. Until next time, bye!